All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar called From Playing to Printing. This is sort of a part two to another webinar we did earlier this school year. But you did not have to attend that one to attend this one, but this is kind of a little bit more specifics about fine motor skills and how you can support them in the classroom. My name is Joanna Pashlik-Shimmick. I graduated from the University of Illinois at Chicago with my master's in occupational therapy. I currently work at Chicago Pediatric Therapy and Wellness Center with Kirsten. We see a variety of kiddos there, from like babies through teenagers, with a lot of my kids being in this like preschool population, like 2 to like 3, 4, 5s, lots of those guys. We see a variety of kiddos from that have like a variety of challenges, including like developmental delay, fine and visual motor delays, ADHD, anxiety, autism, genetic conditions, cerebral palsy, things like that. Um, just one more thing I forgot to mention. Feel free to throw questions in the chat box. We should have some time at the end as well, or unmute yourself. We are always welcome and love open discussions in our webinars. So please feel free to jump in if you have questions. And if it's something we'll address later, we'll also let you know about that too. So now I'm going to pass it to Kirsten and let her introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kirsten Amundsen. I'm an occupational therapist. I went to St. Louis University for my bachelor and my master's of occupational therapy. As Joanna mentioned, I practice as a co-lead occupational therapist at Chicago Pediatric Therapy and Wellness Center in the city of Chicago here. Currently in that private clinical setting, but I've also worked in therapeutic day schools. I've run some different groups and I'm accredited through Illinois Early Intervention. As Joanna mentioned, we see many children across the age and different diagnoses, primarily working with kids 2 to 7 with the various diagnoses with autism, ADHD, etc. Lots of different things. I've done various trainings, kind of listed here if you're interested in learning more. But yeah, that is about me. So we're going to jump into some of our objectives and then kind of starting our day together.
All right. So we're going to look at typical fine motor development for ages 2 through 5. We're going to dive into some classroom adaptations, so things that you can do in your classroom, a variety of grasping activities, scissor skill activities, pre-writing activities, some sensory play ideas, because that's also great to develop fine motor skills, strengthening activities, and then listing and leaving you guys with a bunch of holiday and seasonal activities, since I feel like those are really great ones. We structure a lot of our sessions around whatever kind of holidays and stuff and doing themed activities that way. So that's how we do it a lot at the clinic. So now that we've learned a little bit about us, we want to know a little bit more about you.
So go ahead and take a minute or two to answer this in the chat box for us. So we want to know your profession, ages you work with, where you're kind of based, and the fine motor challenges that you see in the classroom.
Sorry, kindergarten,
yeah.
Public school, awesome. 4 to 6. Okay, a little bit older kindergarten, aides, love having aides here. Lots of teachers, of course, which makes sense. Really professional coach. Para, awesome.
So we have a few in the older age range too, like that 5 to 7 I'm seeing, 3 to 5,
Yeah.
which is great. So we're gonna have a good mixture of people with us today, which is awesome.
Cool.
So continue to throw your answers in there. We're just gonna start moving on so we can make sure we get through everything today, but feel free to keep introducing yourselves to one another.
All right. So we are going to start with hand development. So just to give you a little bit of background information here and kind of how we develop all of these skills. So development starts with the ulnar or pinky and ring side of the hand, and then it kind of goes towards the radial or thumb side of the hand. So when you start to develop things, you kind of have more of that like gross grasp where you might see a baby holding something on their pinky or ring, or what we call the ulnar side of the hand. And then eventually development kind of moves and they start to use more of that pincer grasp as they get a little bit older, which is more of that radial side of the hand. So the reason it develops this way is it leads to the development of precision. So the radial side, which is the thumb and index finger, are the precision. So being able to pick up small items, manipulate them with your fingers, things like that. versus the ulnar side of your hand becomes more of the power side of your hand. So you use that side of your hand for stability and power and strength. So that's just kind of how our hands typically develop. Um, it also helps us to develop an open web space, and this helps support appropriate grasp for hand development. So again, we'll look at some pictures in a minute, but we want to see that nice open web space. So that's strengthening our muscles and our thumb. So that way we can grasp a pencil or pick up small objects, things like that. So in hand manipulation skills develop later. And what this means is moving an object from the fingertips to the palm of the hand, and then from the palm of the hand back to the fingertips. So that's a little bit of a later skill, but also really important to just be able to participate and manipulate objects throughout your day. So functional grasp and release begins developing at 9 to 10 months and gets more precise with a pincer grasp around 24 months of age. So again, a lot of babies, when they're little, they start using that like whole hand grasp, or they might grasp something with the ulnar side of their hand. And then once they get closer to two, they're really fine tuning that pincer grasp, where they're able to isolate their pinky and ring and middle finger against their hand and pick up that small object with their thumb and their pointer finger. All right, so just to give you a little idea here, with this is a closed versus an open web space. And this picture on the left, you see how my hand is kind of like holding that marble, but there's not any space there. It is, my thumb is kind of on top of my pointer finger, not a super precise way to grasp an object and be able to manipulate it, right? So if I were trying to hold this marble and put it inside of something, or turn around or move it into the palm of my hand, that would be pretty tricky. Versus this picture on the right, this is a nice open web space. I kind of have that big O or that big C on my side of the on with my hand. I'm able to hold that marble with my fingertips, and I have that nice open web space with my thumb being able to support that as well. So some of our kids can have a hard time with this. They might have a little bit of thumb weakness. This would mean like using a pincer grasp might be a little bit more challenging, grasping a button, holding a pencil, using scissors, all of those kinds of things. So this is what we want to see, is this nice open web space when we're grasping a small object. Okay. So from just to kind of go over, we went over this in our last presentation that was kind of a precursor to this, but just to give everybody this background information. So grasp development. So from 1 to 2 years old, we use what we call a palmar supinated grasp. So the writing tool is held with a fisted hand with the thumb up, and the movement comes from the shoulder. We will look at some more pictures on the next slide, just as a heads up, so we can kind of talk a little bit more about those. From 2 to 3 years old, children use what's called a digital pronated grasp. So the writing tool is held by a fisted hand with the thumb down, and the arm moves as one unit. From 3 to 4 years old, they develop more of a static tripod grasp. So the writing tool is held by the thumb, index, and middle finger, with the ring and pinky fingers slightly tucked, and their arm moves as a unit. So again, so this movement started out at the shoulder, it kind of progresses down the arm, and then from 3 to 4 years old, it's more about that wrist and lower arm movement. And then from 4.5 to 6 years old, they develop that dynamic tripod grasp. So the writing tool is held with the thumb, index, and middle finger, with the pinky and ring fingers flexed to form an arch. And the movement is coming from small movements of the fingers and the wrist instead of the arm. So this is just kind of how things typically go. I will say there's a lot of variability in grasping patterns, which I'm sure, as all of you have seen in the classrooms, there's a bunch of variety there. So this is just kind of typically how things go, but there's so much variety. But also want to keep in mind that it's not super, our 3-year-olds that are starting school, it's not age appropriate yet. They should be moving towards a static tripod grasp, but it's not age appropriate yet for them to have like this beautiful tripod grasp. And that's okay if they're still working on it, or they're playing around with different grasping patterns on a pencil. All right, so we have our pictures here. So we have the picture on the left is that like fisted grasp, that palmar supinated grasp. Then your hand kind of flips over and you have all of your fingers on that pencil, but that pointer finger is out. It's more of this pronated grasp. And then from 3 to 4 years old, it's more of a static tripod grasp. This is also a little bit more of like, it looks like my ring finger is also on that pencil. So we call this a quadrupod grasp. This is often something we see as well, kind of getting that extra finger on there for a little bit more support. We see that as well. Not concerning there, especially at like this 3 to 4 years old age. And then the picture on our right is that dynamic tripod grasp that we are all looking for. So there are a bunch of other types of grasping patterns. Some are very functional and some are a little bit dysfunctional, which can cause like pain or fatigue, something like that. So I'm sure that you guys have seen a variety of grasping patterns. I sometimes pick up my pencil and wrap my thumb over the top of my fingers, right? So that's like called a thumb wrap. So is it a beautiful tripod grasp? No, but it's functional for me because I think most people can read my handwriting, right? And I don't have any pain, I don't have any fatigue, anything like that. Um, so I'm assuming you're all kind of reflecting on what your grasping pattern is and just think about whether it works for you. Some red flags we would see, like if a kiddo is still maybe using this fisted grasp at like 4 years old, that would be a big red flag. 3 years old, like if they haven't progressed at all, or they're only using that fisted grasp, that would be a big red flag to maybe dig a little bit deeper. All right.
And someone in the comments kind of mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit further about strengthening and things, but someone in the comments had mentioned just seeing more delay with fine motor skills in general lately because kids are, more so on
Yeah.
iPads and they're not going out and playing and there's more screen time. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably something that we're seeing across the board just as times have kind of
Yep.
shifted. And so it's
And they've
definitely
removed some milestones from.
Yeah, so but this is definitely these are still like our recommendations and we'll kind of talk a little bit more
Mhm.
about strengthening and things, but yeah, it's definitely something that, as a whole front, everything has kind of
Yeah.
changed a little bit. But these are still kind of the recommendations and what we would recommend for our kiddos.
Yep.
So
All right. So we are going to watch a little video here. Um, I'm going to kind of just let everybody watch and then maybe we'll talk about it. So she's got kind of this like adapted tripod, static tripod grasp with, I think, that middle finger on there. Look and see where we're going to watch again. Look and see if you can figure out where like the motion is coming from when she first starts at the beginning of the video. She's got some wrist movement there, but a lot of arm motion because her
mhm,
elbow is kind of up in the
floating.
air
Yeah.
floating.
And
And
then
then she places her elbow on there. And do you see how she's able to get a little bit more of that like
wrist,
finger
yeah.
wrist motion
Hmm.
happening? So just wanted to kind of show this video just so you have kind of this is a fairly typical grasping pattern. She has a decent grasp on that marker. And she is using a thicker marker there, and that's okay. But her arm is initially floating off the table, and then she kind of figures out, oh, if I rest it down there, I get a little bit more support, and she gets a little bit more control when she's writing. So,
She's got a nice bilateral, so she's stabilizing,
yeah,
with that left hand. We talked about this video is wonderful. It's maybe not the best height for her because she's, a little bit smaller than what
yes,
this table looks like. So her posture is a little bit off. But in terms of her grasping pattern, it was a really nice video to showcase, that stabilization piece really made a big difference for her. And this is like very typical of what we see of our 3-year-olds and what we would want to see from
see
our 3-year-olds.
exactly. All right.
Okay. So some visual and fine motor developmental milestones. So at 2 to 3, we want to start seeing them imitating horizontal and vertical lines, being able to remove a screw top lid, turning pages one at a time in a book, building an 8-block tower, and being able to string about 4 beads. Now in like standardized testing, there are some of these with like timed elements to it. I'm not as concerned about how
No.
quickly a child can do some of these skills. I'd rather just see that they have the skill set to do that. Um, at 3 and 4 years old, we're kind of advancing those skills, building an 8-block tower, starting to do like circles, snipping across the paper with scissors. I will tell you the amount of kiddos that come into me at 3 and 4 and parents are terrified to give them scissors.
Yes.
So they've never had exposure to that.
Yeah.
Is something that we see often too. Using that non-dominant hand to stabilize, which is that bilateral coordination that we talked about kind of in that video. So being able to, if you're right-handed, use left to stabilize. I will say at 3 and 4, not every kid has an established dominant hand yet, and that's okay. But there are plenty of kids that do have an established dominant hand, and you'll see them stabilize with one and color with the other. They should be able to start zipping and unzipping a backpack. And then between 4 and 5 is when we're starting to see writing their name, copying those simple shapes like squares, things like that, triangles, cutting and gluing with good pressure modulation. So being able to squeeze hard enough and not too hard. So they're not, have the whole page
Mhm.
covered in glue, but you can also get the glue to come out. And then this is again when we start demonstrating that hand preference and dominance. Again, that does not mean that they couldn't have one earlier than that, but this is when we really want to see that established. we have some people that come in, really, really young kids, and they're like, my kids are righty, and they're 1 years old, and we're like, well, we don't know that for sure yet. It's something that's still developing, and at that age, we really want them to be using both hands.
We want them to explore with
So
both
that's
hands.
actually, yeah, so that's actually more of a red flag if we're seeing a really
Only,
big
yeah.
preference, really, really early on. So again, close to that 4 and 5, that's when we want that established dominant hand. That's when we want that hand to be strong enough to do those things.
Somebody asked a good question, Kirsten. So, are there specific writing utensils you encourage kids to use at certain
Mhm.
ages, markers versus crayons versus pencils? I feel like everybody might have a slightly different response, and maybe even Kirsten and I. I have two twin nieces that are 18 months old, and my sister was like, what should I do for them? And I kind of encourage, especially from like 1.5 to 2, it's really just about exploration.
Mhm.
And so I don't necessarily do, I know they make these like egg-shaped crayons and things
Mhm.
like that. I usually go for like a thicker marker or a thicker crayon, but nothing that's like super bulky or big.
Mhm.
Just because like that's not super age appropriate for a very long time. With
Yeah.
that said, it's really just exposure. And so any marker crayon that they might be using chalk outside, a pen, like a
Mhm.
thicker pencil, like whatever that is, just to support them is fine. I think as like 3, 4 year olds, even those like, like those marker in the video, I think that's super appropriate for those kids because they're still really fine tuning that ability to use their finger and wrist motion in order
Mhm.
to color something in. And like super thin crayons at like or super thin markers, I think at that age can be frustrating for some kids,
Mhm.
especially if that skill is a little bit harder, they're like a little bit weaker. So
Yeah.
I definitely think like school age, right? Like 5, 6, I probably start to use more like pencils, colored pencils, things like that.
Mhm.
We will talk about some adaptations, right? Because there are like shortened markers
Mhm.
and shortened like and like broken crayons and things like that that we do use to support grasping.
Yeah, especially those younger. I do feel
Yeah,
like those really young kids, giving them sometimes a really long giant marker is harder for them to control.
control.
And
Yeah,
that's when you'll see that like fisted grasping pattern come out sometimes. So I will with my like really littles. I mean, imagine someone giving you a pencil that's 3 times the size of your hand and trying to manipulate it. It's gonna be
yeah,
a lot harder, right? And more frustrating. Especially if a kiddo has a neurodivergence or something else, some delays there, that's going to be even more frustrating. And then there's going to be a lack of interest to even
hmm
try. So that's when I'll usually use those smaller
hmm
markers and crayons just because it gets a little bit more
yeah.
success with our kiddos.
I kind of think that any standard marker, crayon, pencil, all of that stuff, like, yes, there are times where we use them strategically, but like exposure to all of that stuff for
Mhm.
all of these like 2 to 5 year old ages is super important just to develop that strength, that coordination, and that control.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's a good question. All right.
Okay, so bilateral coordination, I already kind of touched on it a little bit there. So what is it? It's the ability to use both hands together for an activity. Again, we kind of mentioned that developing between that around 3 to 4 is when we see that developing. Why it's important, we do so many things throughout the day using both sides of our body. So it's important that we can kind of stabilize, manipulate that side of thing. I mean, think about all the things you did today, putting on your clothes, zipping up your jacket, maybe no jacket today if you're in Chicago, it's a little bit warmer than usual, but being able to mix something, maybe you made something for breakfast, cracking
Open
an
a
egg,
container.
yeah, open containers, so many things throughout the day. Those are just naming a few that we're using both sides. So super important. It develops kind of in 3 different stages. Symmetrical, so kind of both sides of the body working together. Again, like putting on a sock, squeezing glue, clapping, all those things. Clapping develops pretty early on for kiddos, and then alternating one side of the body and then the other, like walking and climbing. So being able to kind of reciprocate that movement. And then dominant side with stabilizing side, again, like cutting with scissors. So being able to hold with, if you're right handed, hold with left, and then cut with right. Again, writing while stabilizing with the other. So some different activities that facilitate bilateral coordination. Um, I mean, I have kids that come in that definitely don't have awareness of where the other side of their body is. I have kids that will try to cut without holding onto the paper. They just kind of expect you to do it, or they're trying to cut on the table. Or I have a kiddo that will write and just let the paper kind of slide around and just kind of like lets his arm hang there. So we do a lot of things to facilitate this bilateral coordination. So things like jumping rope, rolling with a rolling pin, playing catch, squeezing a glue bottle, climbing on a ladder, a rock wall. Hopscotch is great, swimming, kind of tearing paper, jumping jacks, mixing, stirring, so many different things. The list could go on and on and on forever. Sometimes I'll do like simple patty cake games, so
Hmm.
clapping together, clapping across body. I'll do different games on the floor where I have two different spots and left hand touches the other, blue and right hand touches red. Something fun like that too. So again, the list of things could go on and on and on here, but just doing lots of things that really encourage and make you use that bilateral coordination. We call it helper hand all the time.
All the time.
Don't forget your helper hand. Where is it? Make sure that you're using it when you're doing your activities.
And she's actually not doing as great of a job in this picture. She's still learning this bilateral coordination because she's a little bit younger. But I just think I like this picture just because, like, cooking or mixing or baking, like getting, right, making a recommendation for how we can get kiddos involved with that stuff because cooking, all of that, like, so functional and such a good way for kids to be able to help with those activities and then work on these bilateral coordination skills.
Okay, so quick question for you guys. We want to open the chat. Why would upper body strengthening be important for fine motor development and execution of those fine motor activities? So if anyone can give me an answer of why that would be important, please go ahead and add that in there.
Yeah, lacing cards is another good example.
Lacing cards,
yeah.
great. Why do we think that this would be important? Stronger core is super important. Yep. Someone hit it on the head. Moves from large to small. So you got to have that. Yep. Gross motor develops before fine motor.
Core strength. Yeah, these are all great answers. Yep.
Yep. Proximal to distal. You got it. Yep. Exactly. You guys hit it on the head. You hit it right. Perfect. So we really need that. We're in our previous presentation, we went through a lot of core and posture and strengthening. We're not going to go through as much of that today, but we want to talk about like why it's important because we always talk about this and we talk about with our PTs a lot too, but you really have to have that strong foundation in order to access those fine motor, those little muscles. So as someone mentioned, like that stable base is really going to help you access those little tiny ones for those fine motor skills. So we're going to do a very, very quick kind of overview of some upper body strengthening and things that you can do. And as someone mentioned earlier, a lot of kids aren't getting out and moving as much as they used to.
So this is super important.
Yeah.
Get them up and moving.
If they're home on the weekends hanging out in front of the TV or iPads or whatever they're doing, they're not getting out and moving as much as maybe they were. And right now too, like in the wintertime.
Yes.
I mean, I think we see more of this too. The kids are kind of hanging out at home, doing what they want. Summertime, we might get a little bit more active, but we're kind of seeing a trend, as someone kind of mentioned. So just some upper body strengthening next to easy things you can do in the classroom to kind of help with this too. So handwriting and coloring in prone, kind of meaning being on your belly, as you see in this picture here, just kind of laying there, being able to color right, or even just playing an activity on your belly really helps strengthen all those muscles too. Drawing with the paper taped underneath a table. So that's really fun when you can make almost like a fort or something fun and tape up the work because that really makes you have to use your shoulder muscles and really use those fine motor skills rather than just doing it on a desk. It's another way to challenge your muscles. Animal walks. We have like a crab walk here, bear walk kind of in the middle. Those are great for transitions. You can do them in the hallway, you can do them within the classroom, and they're a really fun way to strengthen. I especially love bear walking. It's crab walking is a little bit harder, especially for those littles. Those someone that mentioned they have like 5, 6, those would probably be better for them.
Yeah.
But those really littles, they can do bear walking. That's super easy. Not for everybody, but it's a little bit easier than a crab walk, for example. It's great because you're getting all this pressure through your hands, so it really helps develop those arches of your hand. It gives you lots of input and also strengthens the upper body. You could take that one step further and do wheelbarrow walks if the kiddo's strong enough. Holding closer to the core is going to make it easier for them. Holding closer out to their feet is going to make it harder. So if it's really tricky holding out their feet, you can move up closer to like their shins or their thighs, things like that. I don't usually hold on to the joints because I don't like to hold on to knees or anything like that, but that's a way you could adapt. Yoga, great way to relax,
activate that core.
Activate the core. We love yoga.
Strengthening balance.
So many things you can do. And then obviously just play. Getting outside as much as you can when the weather permits and just having it's so important for promoting the strengthening, as we mentioned, Kids aren't doing it as much as we would like them to. So as much as we're able to give them those opportunities, it's really important. Outside free playtime, playground, all that good stuff.
Okay. So now we're going to jump in a little bit more about when we can adapt and based on things that you're seeing. So if you have a kiddo in your class who's having difficulty maintaining a grasp, this could indicate issues with endurance or hand strength. That would be a good time to use an adaptation. If they report pain with the grasp or a lot of fatigue, I would say. If they have difficulty with arm, upper body, or hand control, we have some kids who have like a coordination disorder or maybe have some kind of challenges or like changes with their tone that might make hand control a little bit harder, so that might be a time to adapt. If their grasp is delayed, so working through some different adaptations might help support them to be able to help them move them through some of these like grasping and fine motor milestones. For older students, it can help improve legibility, letter formation, pressure, and speed. For older students, I'd probably say more of those like 5 to 7 year olds, not as much, I would say, before kindergarten. To grade an activity to meet a child for the just right challenge. So sometimes when I'm teaching a child something brand new that might be really hard for them and might have a lot of frustration with it, I might use an adaptation just to get them to be a little bit more successful with that new skill or that new activity. And then I feel like I will, we might continue with that adaptation, but then I can kind of fade it back a little bit once they're doing a better job. So just to kind of get their buy-in, if you will, their interest, and that just to kind of boost their confidence when they are learning something new, because that can be challenging for kids. So to help assist with learning a new motor plan, as I mentioned, and help with motor and joint development as well.
And the first kind of bullet point that we talked about is we'll see a lot of kids that are able to get to like a tripod grasping pattern or a quadrupod, something like that, and they're using it for a little bit, and then they get tired and they go back to a
Or
fifth
switch hands.
Or yeah, exactly. Or they're going from their preferred hand is their right, and then they're switching to left, something like that.
Getting tired. Yeah.
And that's usually like that strength and endurance is just not where it needs to be to keep up with the demand of whatever the task is. So that's that we'll see, I would say pretty frequently.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the things we see the most often is probably delayed and difficulty maintaining for a longer period of time.
Okay. So some different adaptations. The first one we're going to talk about here is a slant board. So a slant board is an inclined surface utilized to assist with handwriting skills. It allows for forearm stabilization and for the wrist to slightly extend backwards in order to get the wrist in a good position for writing or coloring or drawing or tracing, whatever it is you're doing. It also assists with bringing the visual gaze up for tracking. So if you have a kid that maybe has a little bit of a slouched posture or something like that, like bringing that visual gaze up can help them kind of sit upright. Um, it helps open a web space for when writing. Again, getting that wrist in that nice position where there's a little bit of extension in your wrist, that helps open and provide that your thumb with that more open web space that we need in order to hold a pencil appropriately. It makes copying from the board easier. So on the picture on our right, that is one type of slant board. There's also a slant board. So this slant board is a little wooden one that has like a little lip on the bottom that the paper sits on. There's also slant boards that have like a little clip on top to hold the paper in place. There's a bunch of different options out there. You can also use like an easel or a vertical surface. You can also tape paper to a wall like we did in this middle picture here. As Kirsten already mentioned in one of the last slides, taping that picture underneath the table or a desk or something like that, again, like is another great adaptation. I'll also just use a binder sometimes in the classroom, maybe like a 3 to 4 inch binder, something like that. And that can be used as a slant board instead if you don't have access to one. So they're a great option to use. I feel like I use them with kids who have difficulty with that grasping pattern or a little bit weaker or maybe just like poor posture, something like that. And it can be a really helpful tool just to give them a little bit more support underneath their forearm and the wrist while they're writing.
Yeah, definitely for those kids, the elbows are just floating up in space.
Yep,
and
they need some place to put them.
Yeah, they're having a hard time getting kind of elbow down to be able to access those like really fine precision skills versus it coming from their shoulder or wrist.
Yeah.
Like
and I will use this for some of my little ones too while they're like learning some of these skills, right? Even if we don't expect the 4 year olds to have that perfect posture grip yet, they're progressing towards it, but I will still use this as a tool for them as well because I think it can be helpful just to give them that little more support so they can access that better control. Another option is a weighted utensil. This can assist with the legibility of writing. It can help stabilize hand and arm movements. If a student has decreased hand control, such as like somebody who has tremors, or maybe I've also used this for kids who have like cerebral palsy or something like that. So some changes in tone that might be impacting them. The weight can be in the writing utensil itself, so you can like add one on. So in this picture on the bottom, this is a little weight that we added to this pencil. So it's heavy. It really makes you feel that pencil in your hand. I've also had like 1 pound wrist weights, or maybe even less, like a half a pound sometimes if you can find them small enough. And put weights around a student's wrist while they're writing, just so that they get that better feedback, because adding that weight just tells your body, right? It can help increase that proprioception. So it can tell your body, okay, like this is where the pencil is, this is where my wrist is. It just kind of helps give them more of that input and more of that feedback, and then gives them more control to be able to use when they're writing. Um, so if you have a student who doesn't have really good body awareness, right? They're kind of like flopping all over the place. Maybe they like bump into things frequently or have a hard time like climbing or staying upright going down a slide, like something like that. If you kind of notice some of those bigger gross motor challenges, or if a kid's like falling out of a chair all the time, they could have poor body awareness. And if that's the case, they probably also have it in our hands, because what is happening in one part of our body is happening in all parts of our body. And so adding this weight, whether it be on the pencil itself or adding a wrist or a wrist weight or something like that, can really help just give them more of that feedback, which will then help give them some more of that like graded fine motor control. So just one option to keep in mind. Anything weighted, if you are going to put like a wrist weight or something on a child, I would probably let the parent know that's something you're trialing with, and probably like potentially work with an OT just to talk about weight options and things like that. We don't want it to like be too heavy for the child. And also just because it's something that you might be placing on their body, you just want to let them get some consent from that parent. But it could be a really good option if you have them available to you.
So some more adaptations here. Built up writing utensils can be a great tool. So for these kiddos that really can't maintain grasp, so I've had some kiddos with like neurological conditions that are just a little bit weaker. They have something kind of working against them in terms of being able to grasp or hold on to something for a long period of time. So reduced grasping strength, limited hand or finger dexterity. Sometimes we'll use it for pressure modulation. So if they're pushing too hard or too soft, we can throw one of these on there. And you can see the picture here. We have that red, blue, and yellow. So they can be different widths. So you can start with like maybe the thicker one and then work down to something thinner and thinner and thinner until you can take it off. Because the goal is to build up that strength until they're able to maintain a little bit more. In some kiddos, I had some kiddos that have neurological conditions that stay at that bigger built up writing utensil, and that's okay too, because it helps them get done what they need to. I also will use this on different things during activities of daily living. So I have one of my kiddos that has reduced grasping strength. She has that collapsed thumb that comes in. She doesn't have a good open web space. And so we put it on her spoon for when she's eating, and it really helps her maintain for a longer period of time. So she doesn't have to switch from left to right. She's able to get more food in her mouth and hold on to something for a little bit longer. So this is great because they're easy to put on and off. You can put them on markers, put them on pencils, you can put them on spoons and toothbrushes. You can really kind of make it what you need, which is really great. And you can cut them down to size. So as you see, there's long kind of tubes of it, so you can make it the appropriate size for that kiddo's hand and what they're needing. And so this I might use for my kids. Again, you might use this with a kid that's using that gross grasp because that's all they can maintain. They're too weak to maintain anything else, whether that's because of a condition they have or something else we need to work up to more strengthening. So it's a great tool. Some other ones, we started talking about this a little bit earlier, is those broken utensils can be used to kind of support a more age appropriate grasping pattern. So again, if a kiddo is putting their whole hand around a bigger utensil, giving them something smaller kind of forces them to use that grasping pattern. So it can help support finger and wrist control during drawing. So again, like if you're giving a 2-year-old a really giant big marker and they can't hold on to it, using something smaller can be helpful, as we talked about earlier. So some different options. You can use already broken crayons or break them in half. We love broken crayons.
Hmm.
Don't ever get rid of them. Short markers. You can paint with like a broken Q-tip. So the Q-tips are great, but you can even just break them in half super easy. So we'll paint with those sometimes. Flip crayons are great. Using the shortened pencils from Handwriting Without Tears, golf pencils, as you can see here. And you can kind of use this in combination with like a slant board or a vertical surface as well to help with that wrist stability and then use those small finger movements. So we definitely use the broken, or shortened utensils all the time. And sometimes I'll give a kid a half broken crayon and they still somehow
Oh,
manage
some
to get all their fingers
they're
around it.
sneaky.
And so I'll break it even more. And I'll make it even smaller, and then it kind of makes them use that grasping pattern. And then we try to work on holding it for a longer period of time until they get too tired. So that's a great one. Here's just another set of pictures of those different things. So here's our broken crayon box that we'll use. It kind of, again, there's no way that she'd be able to get her whole fist around that crayon. It's too small. The flip crayons, we have two on each side. So you can talk about holding just the yellow side, just the purple side, again, or just giving them a smaller one. And then the golf pencils or the shortened pencils are great. So we also, as we use pencils throughout the years, we keep
Get
them.
smaller.
They get smaller and smaller.
That's okay.
And we keep them and we use them for the appropriate kiddos.
All right, so some more classroom adaptations. So we're going to go through some different like grippers that you might use. Some of them are, there's so many out there, so that you've probably even seen some that maybe aren't even listed here, but they can help correct a dysfunctional grasp into a more functional grasp, such as like a tripod or a modified tripod grasp. Um, I will use these with kids that are maybe, particularly with kids that are older, that are like really set in their patterns, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
that have like a really non-functional grasp because it's impacting their legibility or they're complaining of fatigue or pain or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Yeah.
I just tried using this one in the middle, the claw grip. I just started using this one with a little girl that I just started seeing like a month ago. She has a pretty collapsed web space and she's like tucking her thumb underneath her other fingers while she's writing and coloring. We'll just do a little case review here. She's like 4.5. So she actually has pretty good control, but I'm a little bit concerned that long term that can impact and just kind of continue to weaken the muscles in her thumb with them being tucked underneath her other fingers and she wouldn't be able to like access them and keep that thumb on there. So I don't want it to promote more weakness. So we trialed out this claw grip today. So there's a hole for her thumb and then a hole for her pointer finger and a hole for her middle finger. And she did such a beautiful job with it. So this one is probably the one that we use the most, the claw grip in the middle, because there's like a designated spot to put your fingers and they kind of have to stay there. And then you also have to actively pinch that pencil. So I like that there's kind of this passive part of like I place my fingers in it, but then I actively have to still pinch the pencil and hold it between my fingers. So that's a really great one. They do come in various sizes. So if you are interested in having them, like you might have to kind of play around with sizing a little bit depending on the kids in your classroom. Um, this one on the left is probably not my favorite, but it is like a little bit of a built-up handle, and there's like a little bit of a spot to an indent for you to like rest your thumb on and then put your other fingers on top of it as well. This twist and write pencil is kind of a funny one. So it's kind of shaped, I don't know, kind of like a T, but kind of not because there's two prongs at the top of it. But you put your pointer finger through it and then hold around. It's a little bit thicker too than a standard pencil. And then you hold it with your thumb finger and your middle finger as well, with your pointer finger kind of sitting on top. So it's promoting more of that tripod grasp. Don't use it too often, but I have used it for some kids that are maybe resistant or having some like kind of rigidity with trying other options. It's purple, it's sparkly. Sometimes that can be a fun sell for kids. So I've used this one sometimes too. And it's usually not super long term that I use it for, but it might just kind of break the ice for some of the other like grippers and stuff as well. This grotto grip is the one on the left. So the pencil goes in there, and then there's like a designated like resting spot. There's also, sorry, this picture in the middle is showing that there's an arrow pointing down, so you need to make sure you put the pencil in it the right way. So then there's a spot for you to kind of pinch your fingers in. So the thumb is on one side, and then your other two fingers are on the other side. So it just kind of is another option, kind of similar to the claw grip, where it really promotes this tripod grasp, but you still have to actively pinch as well. And then this one on the right, you can just kind of put your thumb and your pointer finger in there. It's another decent option as well. I would say it's not as like defined as like the claw grip is with those three little spots for your finger. Um, so but another option if kids are into it. Sometimes I think it's helpful to have that little, like the pencil at the bottom is a little bit built up, which can be nice too.
It can almost be a little bit of a downgrade from the claw grip if
Yeah,
you wanted to go from the
true.
claw
That's a
grip
good point that you can
to
kind of downgrade
pencil.
too. Yep.
Yeah. And with grips and kind of adaptations, like Joanna is using it with like a 4.5-year-old. I would say that's probably the youngest I use
Yeah.
with is like 4.5, 5. And while we're still using these to promote a different grasping pattern, we're still also always doing strengthening,
Yes.
always doing things to still promote those muscles. We're not slapping on a gripper and being like, okay, you're
You're
good to
good.
go.
No, we're doing lots of, with my little 4.5-year-old, we're doing lots of other like strengthening activities as
Yeah.
well.
So the underlying reasoning for using these is, for the strength piece. And so we still want to kind of fix the underlying causation of it while this can also promote what we want to see. So it's not
Just give them a
perpetuating.
little bit more support.
Yeah. So it's not perpetuating the issue. I think we've had OTs we worked with in the past that don't like to use them until the kids are a little bit older. And I think that's fair, but I think we prefer to use them a little bit younger
Correct it a little bit younger.
yeah, we want to
Give them a little
correct
bit more
them.
support now.
And if they need a gripper to do that, then we kind of will use them and then
Hope to
still
fade them.
still also use strengthening at the same time. So again, we're not just giving kiddos grippers and then letting them go. We want to kind of correct what the underlying difficulty is.
All right. So now we're going to talk about some different scissor options. So again, so scissor skills, super important, bilateral coordination. So you're using one hand for your scissors and the other hand to stabilize the paper. So loop scissors, which are pictured here on the right, are spring-loaded scissors that help to teach the motor plan for cutting, as well as provide assistance to open the scissors if a student has decreased hand strength. Um, I really love to use these when I'm just like introducing scissor skills with a kid, or if a kid is of the age where they might be doing cutting activities at school, but they have that decreased hand strength. I always teach kids to use these the same way I would help them place their fingers in standard scissors. So the thumb is always on top, with the other fingers on the bottom. They're a really great tool just because it makes it a little bit easier. Like some of my kids still might need some help to squeeze it closed because of that hand strength piece. But then I feel like they kind of figure it out a little bit faster because they can feel that spring pop open, but then they can still work on that squeezing it closed. So can be a really great tool to use, especially with our littles. I often, if I have like a 2.5, 3-year-old that I'm introducing snipping with, like I'll often start with these and then progress to standard scissors after that. Um, you can also use double loop scissors. So these are scissors with holes for the child's hand as well as your hand to help the child open and close the scissors, which can be helpful for kids who like need that kinesthetic or feeling that open and close. So there's 2 loops on the top and 2 loops on like the bottom. So the child would put their fingers in the holes and then you would have put them behind theirs and help them open and close. I don't use them a ton, but they are also a great tool. And for some kids, I think them helping feel the scissors open and close is a much better way to kind of teach them than potentially just the loop scissors, which only spring back open. So they might have a hard time with that. So some helpful tips. You want to teach students to place the fingers around the loops with the thumb on top and the remaining fingers around the bottom, the same way you would with standard scissors. You want to teach them to use their helping hand to hold the paper, also with their thumb up. And then you can use like a visual cue, such as like a sticker or something like that, if they need help for their helping hand. And we always try to pair that language as well. We use lots of helping hands in OT world.
Yeah, you can put it on the scissor itself. You can put it on the paper where you want them to hold. I'll do that. I'll kind of match up like this is where thumbs go. They hit the smiley faces. So one on paper, one on the scissors that we're using so that they kind of understand where their thumbs are supposed to be.
Okay, so different types of paper. So there's 3-lined paper that there is a solid bottom line, a solid top line, and then this middle dotted line. So I would say this is more for like those 5, 6, 7 beyond kiddos that where it is appropriate to look at like sizing, casing, and line awareness. And it can benefit students who may be struggling and are more visual learners. So it just kind of helps define that space a little bit more for them. And we'll practice like in individual sessions. I'll practice like, our smaller letters go towards like the middle dotted line versus our tall, big capital letters go towards that like top solid line. So just kind of good visual cues for kids. Again, not anything I'm going to be using with our like preschool age, but some of those older, like 5, 6, 7 beyond kiddos that are in those upper grades. So highlighted lined paper as pictured on the left on the bottom. So this just brings the visual attention to the highlighted lines. So it can be helpful for kids that are more of those visual learners. Again, can help with like size, line awareness, casing, all of that stuff. Just by giving that attention, bringing that visual attention there, it just really highlights that line. There's also raised line paper. So this could be helpful for more of those like proprioceptive or kinesthetic learners who need to feel things. So basically, this paper has lines that you can feel are like bumped up above the rest of the paper. So this can also be helpful for kids who maybe have some like vision or visual motor challenges who benefit from like those tactile cues. So that way, as they're feeling, as they're writing something or drawing, they can feel the line on the paper and they can feel it like as it bumps off the paper. So it just can be, simple lined paper, and changing up the visuals or the cues on that can be super helpful for some of our older students.
You can also kind of make this on your own with hot glue. So you
Yeah,
can
it's a fun way to
also,
do it.
yeah, you can also kind of trace,
Laminating paper with.
yeah, you can kind of trace over with hot glue if you have lamination. And that's a really great way to kind of reuse over and over again too. Or I also will
We
do
do
it
that with
for,
dry erase markers.
yeah, I also will do it with specific kids that are like maybe having trouble with their name or certain shapes. I'll like make them out of hot glue to really give them kind of a outline or a bumper
Yeah.
to increase that motor planning and have them kind of figure out where they're supposed to be. And it hopefully becomes rote memory of this is how it goes
Yeah.
around to create a circle or to create my name or whatever the thing is. Again, you can also if a kiddo is still bumping, because you can still go across the lines,
Yeah.
right? There is still a way to do that. But you can make, if you need a little bit of a thicker border, the hot glue can be a great one. And then maybe you can step it down to the bumped lines and then eventually bump it down to nothing too. So, someone asked where you find that. We got ours on Amazon.
Yeah, I'm pretty
So
sure all this is on Amazon, so I
yep.
should be able to find it there.
Yeah, but I think this one is at least the raised paper says it's from TheraPro. So that is, we can throw that in the chat box too if you're interested in purchasing, but that's where we got ours was from Amazon.
All right. Just type that. All right, so Kirsten's gonna type it out for you, and I'm gonna keep chatting. Okay, so some grasping techniques. So pincer grasp, right? So we really want that pincer grasp because we work on that nice open web space, something like that. So we can place small objects such as a bead in an ice cube tray and have students pick out those materials from the container during the task. I like to use ice cream trays because it's like that nice defined space. So I might put like a pom pom or a marble or something in each of those individual ice cube trays. And it helps them to be able to pick up and just kind of isolate that movement, excuse me, with their thumb and their pointer finger. Sometimes I'll give kids like a little tap on their other fingers, like their pinky, their ring, and their middle finger to hold it against the palm. Or sometimes I'll like press it down a little bit and then help them just kind of learn that motor plan a little bit. So try not to do, I try not to do like too much physical assistance. I don't need to, but some kids kind of need that, like, oh, okay, I can hold and isolate my fingers down, hold them here while I isolate and use my other fingers. Students can hold a small object or Play-Doh against their palm while using their pinky, ring, and middle finger while also grasping a pencil or other writing utensil. So I think somebody had mentioned like a cotton ball, something like that. So in this video, I rolled up a little piece of Play-Doh. You could use a cotton ball, a pom-pom, a marble, something small, piece of putty, like something like that, and just held it in the palm of my hand with my pinky and ring and middle finger. And then I isolated using my pointer and my thumb finger while I was writing. So just a super simple way to adapt that. Some kids I feel like I've had some great success with this. Kids think it's like, you're like, okay, hide it in your hand, make sure it stays in there, make sure it doesn't fall out. Like you can make it pretty playful. And some kids we've had to do other things instead, like use a gripper or something like that. But it might be a nice, easy way to just kind of have that available for kids to use in the classroom. So always a great
Yeah.
option.
I always say you're giving your fingers another job to do. They
Yeah,
have a job to
something.
do to hold this,
Yeah.
while your other fingers work. And sometimes that does the trick, especially if I have kids that are a little bit more resistant to putting their fingers like into a gripper, which I've
Yeah.
also had that
Yep.
happen. Sometimes they're a little bit more open to holding onto something, and
Yeah.
that helps them. I also have kids that have bring in little like tiny things they like to hold on to. I'm like, okay, let's make this
Yeah.
more
Yep.
functional. We're gonna hold on to your little finger puppet, but we're gonna put it in where it needs to go to
We're
make sure
gonna
we're
make it
grasping.
disappear and find it
Exactly.
later.
Exactly.
There's also if you want to play something like this, there's like a picking up your pencil song from Handwriting Without Tears, and it just kind of teaches kids how to pick their pencil up off the table and hold it in their hand correctly, and just helps get them set up to be able to do whatever writing, coloring, drawing task you're
Yeah.
doing.
It's just kind of a fun one you can play
Yep.
before doing a handwriting activity just to get them
Set up
set
right
up.
away.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so classroom adaptations, we're going to talk about pressure modulation. So, kind of pressure modulation is like when a child uses that just right amount of force to complete their motor skills. So, like a kid might be using too much or too little. Like this, sometimes we'll get kids that are writing too lightly, where you can see that they're writing, but nothing's really coming out, or it's just very, very light. Or they're pushing so hard, markers are bleeding through the paper, they're breaking pencils, that type of thing. So you can provide some tactile feedback, sandpaper, chalk writing. I think chalk writing is one of my favorites. I'm actually really sad that chalkboards I know they're messy, but I am kind of sad that they're no
They're
longer
gone.
in
I know it's
classrooms.
not the same feedback as a whiteboard.
Because you do get so much feedback when writing. You can write if a kiddo's like pushing too hard, you could write on a thin piece of paper or a tissue. So they have to practice not breaking through it or ripping it. Using mechanical pencil is great. It can definitely cause frustration, so be cautious because they can break easy, but it's a great way to practice not pushing too hard. Um, Pairing fine motor activities with gross motor, so kind of like waking up the body first, doing putty, chair push-ups, animal walks, things like that too. Talking about hard versus soft, kind of talking about that, using that language. You can do a bunch of different games like Jenga, Don't Break the Ice, Topple, Kerplunk are all great ones to kind of practice those pressure modulation skills because if you're pulling too hard or too fast, you're going to make the Jenga tower fall over. If you smash too hard on the Don't Break the Ice, it's all going to, come down. So those are really fun games. You can use weighted utensils, as we kind of mentioned earlier, gives great feedback for those kiddos that are, again, pushing too hard or too soft. It can be a really great adaptation to just give them a little bit more feedback of what's going on. And also just, showing them that the color we need to see when they're coloring or writing, just kind of bringing that to attention. Okay, so we're going to do a really quick case study. We're going to show some pictures on the next slide. Um, so we're going to talk about what could you do now that we've looked at some different adaptations, we've shown you some different things. This is kind of how your student comes in. We're going to say that that student is around 5 years old, so this grasping pattern is no longer appropriate. So I want you guys to throw some ideas out there of what you would do to kind of help the student get to a more appropriate grasping pattern. Again, keep in mind the student is about 5 years old. So the grasping pattern they're currently exhibiting is again close to that like 2-3 range. So how can we get the student to where they need to be? So go ahead and throw some ideas in our chat box here of what you would do to kind of help our student here.
We're working on getting the handwriting song link too. Did somebody find it? Oh, thanks, Karen. You got to it before us. Okay. All right. Cool.
Yep. Trying one of the grips, pencil, slant board. Yep. You guys got it. Slant board is great.
Smaller pencil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots of slant board stickers on the pencil where they should place their fingers.
In this situation, like a weight could be helpful, but I wouldn't necessarily go there first just because like that arm is still floating in the air.
Mm-hmm.
If we're doing other things and it seems like this child has no idea where her body is in space or like is having a really hard time controlling it, I would probably then try it out. But I think first, yeah, I'd be doing like the smaller writing utensil, writing on a vertical surface or a slant board, doing all of those things 1st
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe exploring weights and yeah, a pencil grip too, and then exploring weights if that's not really working.
Hmm.
So
And potentially,
there
there could be something. This kiddo also doesn't have their arm on the table, so it could be this bilateral coordination
coordination,
piece.
totally.
So bilateral coordination is something we would want to fix here. That grasping pattern, as
Yeah.
we're seeing,
That other arm is
and
just hanging out underneath the table.
right, and then kind of elbow floating in
Yeah.
space, right? So those are all things we would want to kind of look at here, figure out what to use. The slant board is a great idea to really get that elbow arm forearm
Hmm.
stabilized, and then maybe using a gripper as
Yeah.
well. So if you've kind of tried some different adaptations, as we talked about here, and like nothing is really making a difference, then you would maybe want to refer out to an OT to get kind of further assistance, additional assistance, if it's not kind of working.
Yeah, and I just want to say, yeah, I think you're right. Like this line paper is probably for a 5-year-old a little bit advanced, especially if they're still using this grasping pattern. Some kids have funky grasp patterns, but still are trying to complete age appropriate activities. But at 5, I would say it's probably a little bit early to be using this paper given the way this child is presenting. So I think that that's a great point. So just wanted to point that out. All right. Great work, everybody.
So, see, some of these are toys and things that we love. We get this question all the time from parents, from caregivers, from teachers. What are some different things that we can get to kind of support
Support.
these skills, these fine motor development skills? So, pop-it books are great to get some finger isolation, peg puzzles, great for kind of that, fine pincer grasp. And you can make them, they have really thick peg puzzles and they have really thin ones. So you can kind of, again, grade, we have a little bit of both. Blocks stacking, a ring stacker for using two hands together, shape sorters, tissue boxes. We can put like a tissue box in it or a cue ball with holes in it and pull out objects from it. So that in and out kind of play. Magnetiles, there's a rock and gem game where you open using tools. There's little gems or little rocks that you open with a tool and it opens gems. That's a really fun one. It's great for pressure modulation too because you have to push. If you don't push hard enough, it's not going to open. And it's great for that bilateral coordination. It also has different colors and shapes in there so you can match, talk about the shapes, colors, all that good stuff. So that's definitely one of my favorites.
Yep.
Mega blocks and Legos are great for those fine motor skills. You can all, like I said, you can get the bigger mega blocks or you can get smaller Legos and kind of grade them. If you have a little bit older kids where you're not worried about them putting Legos in their mouth, you can get some of the smaller ones because those are great for fine motor development. Um, you can do spring flowers.
It's basically just you can build like a little flower garden
Yes.
with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's a really fun one. There's like little peg pieces that you can build try to build it up tall. There's like a little like the grass is kind of like a little puzzle, so it's just a fun little activity.
Mm-hmm. So those are all toys and things, and a lot of these things that people have already. So those are all really great ones that we recommend to families.
All right, so some grasping activities. So these are kind of mostly pretty simple ones that you can do with some activities or some objects from home. So you can pull pom-poms from inside of a whisk. So again, that's a nice pincer activity. And if you're stabilizing that whisk in your other hand, in your helping hand, again, another good bilateral coordination task. You can place toothpicks inside of like a grated cheese or an empty spice container. String beads on a pipe cleaner. If you need to grade that up or grade that down, you could go smaller beads like you can do those really small pony beads, or you can do bigger beads as well. You can pull small beads or other small objects from Theraputty or Play-Doh. So that can be also another good, putty is a good strengthening activity. You can play with building toys that have plastic screws. So you have to twist the screw to tighten and loosen. So that kind of forces you to isolate those fingers and then figure out that rotational movement as well. So that's also a good dexterity activity. You can paint or write using small pieces of sponges. You can paint with Q-tips. And again, you can cut that Q-tip down if you need to. And then for some older kids, we will do some like push pin activities on a little board. So on this picture, we just drew a little heart, and then they're using those push pins to push into that board and take them out when they're done. A good like strengthening and endurance activity as well, because you really do have to push those pieces in. Some more grasping activities. We have some old school light brights at the clinic, which are really fun. Kids generally like those. I've even seen there's like mini light brights too, which are pretty challenging to pick up those pieces, but those pieces are pretty small and thin. And so you really have to isolate those fingers in order to pick them up and put them in. Um, you can use pegboards and add in a visual activity by copying pictures or someone else's design. You can practice rolling small pieces of Play-Doh with your fingertips or making it into like a face or eyes. So many different things you can do with Play-Doh, but rolling out those small bits of Play-Doh between your fingers is a really nice like grasping and dexterity activity. You can build a creation using the toothpicks to connect the Play-Doh. That's a super simple way to just kind of use those two hands and really isolate those fingers. You can draw in Play-Doh with a toothpick. Toothpicks are pretty small, so it's really going to challenge those little muscles in their hands. Lacing cards, a squirt bottle is also a really nice one. I do lots of like squirt bottles or water droppers as kind of like a preparatory activity because squirt bottles, they should be able to isolate their pointer and middle finger and then hold with their thumb. So again, that's nice isolation, which kind of simulates the same movement that you're doing with scissor skills and things like that. So that's why I kind of use those often as preparatory activities. Water droppers are good because then they have to isolate, but they're still kind of activating those little muscles in their hands.
I know we have some individuals with older students in
Okay.
this group. So I just want another one that I love doing is any sort of like kids love like marble run, marble games,
Mhm.
things like that. So again, maybe not for our twos and threes that some of you have, but I know someone mentioned they have like five to sevens. Is I'll give them a few marbles in their hands and they have to like drop one
One
by
at a
one
time. Yeah.
down a marble run or into a container or something. So they have to isolate and pick up just one. So that's really great for that kind of isolation dexterity, kind of moving further. So there's like different Mancala games and fun things out there, but
Mhm.
that's a really great activity. The light bright even, I'll
Hold.
give
Yeah.
give them one or two that they need to bring to their fingertips before they put into it.
Yeah.
So for those people that have slightly older students in this group today, those are some ways that you can add up activities or some different ones that you can do as well.
Okay. So some different pre-writing activities for these. So these are going to be more for our like 2 to 3 year olds. So again, so pre-writing skill development is copying vertical lines, horizontal lines, a circle, and then intersecting lines. So some different activities here. You can practice lines, shapes, and letters in shaving cream. I highly recommend just making it fun at this age and using different mediums. You could use paint, shaving cream, chalk, like whatever that is outside. You can place stickers, buttons, or pom poms on lines, on a line, a shape, or letter cards. Use tape to make letters on the ground or on a vertical surface. And this picture on the right, on the bottom, this is one of the kiddos that I worked with. He was so resistant to doing any writing activities because it was really hard for him and he was struggling with all this pre writing stuff. So, um, I at least got him interested by just put tape on the ground and I drew little dots on it. And then he was driving cars across these different shapes. So at least he was practicing that motor plan in more of a gross motor way, but at least it was some semblance of practice as we work towards doing more like hands on work with using a writing utensil at the table. You can finger paint or stamp writing. You can use fingers or stamps to trace letters. So that's what this kiddo on the left is doing. He's got like a little piece of a sponge in his fingertips, and he is using paint to just dot along those letters there. You can form letters or shapes with Play-Doh and do a bunch of Play-Doh mats. There's so many options out there. There's Play-Doh faces, like Play-Doh food mats, all kinds of different things. So you can do all kinds of different creations with those. So some different ideas to support scissor skills. So scissor skill progression. So first they start with just doing individual snips on paper, cutting on a line, and then progress it to like cutting on a curvy line and then doing different shapes. So tweezer and tong activities, and as I mentioned before, a squirt bottle activity are all really, really, really great activities in order to support that like hand strength and that similar motor plan that you need in order to open and close those scissors. Um, so some different like tweezer and tongs activities, I kind of add them into different games. So there's like sneaky snacky squirrel and like a dog game that has little bones in it. Those some of those do come with tweezers, which are great. But then like Connect Four or something like that, I'll just add tweezers into it. So they're playing a game, but then they have to pick up the pieces and put it into the board with their tweezers instead. Two-handed tasks are activities to support bilateral coordination. So one hand to stabilize and one hand to manipulate. So again, scooping, stirring, mixing, all of those like, baking, cooking activities are really, really great. Or like making sensory activities, things like that. Doing a lacing card where you're stabilizing with one hand and then using your other hand to put the string through the holes. Threading beads, rolling Play-Doh snakes with both hands at the same time on that two-handed piece of rolling that Play-Doh out. You can use tape or visual in the paper to mark where to put your helping hand. And then I often just start with like making like grass at the bottom of paper. So that's one way to practice a lot of snips. So you can get like one snip or one piece of green paper, and then you can snip it all the way across the bottom and make a little picture out of it. So, so many different activities there. But this is just kind of like the progression of scissor skills. And again, we already talked about the loop scissors and the double loop scissors. That would be great adaptations as well.
Mhm. So some sensory activities to promote fine motor development. So we talk all the time about, different sensory experiences really help build up that learning experience. And so we really like to promote fine motor through sensory because that's how we're learning everything and taking information through our sensory system. We're OTs, we'll talk about sensory
Yep,
all day long. But some things that we really like to do to kind of help develop our fine motor, painting obviously is a really easy one. You can do paintbrushes, you can do Q-tips, you can do finger painting. All of those things really help build that experience. Play-Doh, as we've mentioned probably 1,000 times,
yep.
so great for developing those skills as well. Planting and gardening, as you're able to, depending on where you are at school. If you're able to get little plants or something in the classroom or do something outside in the garden, great for that bilateral. Great for maybe they have to put in little seeds into their flower plants. Maybe they get to paint their own flower pot. You can really kind of do what you want with it. Add in some science and science lessons in there too. You can really make it what works for you. um Baggy sensory play is something that we will do often. I do it with some of my kids right now that are a little adverse to touching things, and just really, I have a kiddo that's really on guard with any sort of touch. So the fine motor stuff is really hard for her because she doesn't even want to engage with any of it. So we will, to make it safer for her, we kind of put stuff into a bag so that she's more willing to touch it. Her hands aren't getting messy, but she's able to engage with something sensory. We'll kind of like make shapes and lines in it. We'll do all kinds of fun things, but she doesn't have to feel so scared or afraid of it. So it's a great way to start building up those experiences for her. Exploring with sponges, towels, and water. As you see, we do like a little water bin. This one was Valentine's Day themed, which is right on track for almost at Valentine's Day here. So like squeezing out the sponges, being able to wring out a towel with two hands is a really great activity. We threw some like water droppers in there, buckets for dumping and pouring. All that good stuff is great sensory experience to develop those fine motor skills. Um, you can use different materials from the environment, like leaves and sticks and pine cones, go on a little nature hunt and kind of use those in activities too. Um, Sensory bins, we'll do shaving. We rotate our
Mhm.
sensory bins pretty frequently at our clinic. So we'll do like shaving cream, sand. We'll even just like shred up paper, water beads. Really, really careful with those. With the younger ones, they do have edible ones, but just be super careful if you have tiny, tiny guys. We don't want anyone ingesting those, of course. So just being careful with that and mindful. But these are all great ways to kind of develop the hands, the sensations in our hands, and you can practice. I love practicing writing and shaving cream.
Mhm.
It's probably one of my favorite things to do. And if I have a kiddo that's adverse to touching, I'll use a paintbrush or something like that too. And again, water play, as we kind of already mentioned here. So cute little activity that I have done with one of my kids. This was based on the Rainbow Fish book. So if you're reading that in the classroom, have it in the classroom. This is a really fun activity to pair with it. So kind of rolling out some Play-Doh, we use some sequins and put on just a googly eye. So all you have to do is kind of flatten out the Play-Doh using your hands, and you can use a rolling pin. So, maybe kids are needing a little bit more bilateral coordination, a little bit more pressure. Rolling pins are great, or you can just have them do it with their hands and then kind of squish it out, flatten it out, make a triangle for the tail, and then put on the kind of decorations. If you're working on numbers, you can have the kids count how many sequins go on there. So all the skills you kind of see here are addressed as the sensory processing and integration, some fine pincer grasp, picking up those googly eyes, picking up those sequins, placing them on, in-hand manipulation of being able to just like isolate and pick up one, and then that bilateral coordination, like rolling it out, flattening the dough, that type of thing. So lots of great things there. Some more sensory activities. So water and oil is another really fun one. So we just kind of like put a tray down with some oil in it. We had some different mix of colors with food coloring and water. And then we just kind of had kids explore and squeeze out the water dropper. And then they can kind of play with it, explore with their hands. We added some glitter just for some extra fun there too. This is a really great way to kind of work on that pincer as well. So again, sensory integration and some pincer grasping there. So as I mentioned earlier, those sensory baggies are something that we use all the time here at OT, and something we really like to use for those kiddos that are still exploring, but maybe aren't quite sure about putting their hands fully in something yet. They don't like that wet, messy play, but we want to get them exposed to something, and just increase that motor planning. So all you kind of need for this is just kind of that baggy, glue and contact solution is what we, and baking soda. We also, you can add food coloring in to make it a color, which I think is more fun. And then shaving cream is optional to give it a little bit of a different texture. And then taping it closed to make sure it does not kind of explore everywhere. So putting all those ingredients in the baggie, you tape it shut, and then you can let them explore it. You can,
sorry, buddy.
let them trace in it, write their name in it. They can just kind of touch it, explore, again, kind of making it what fits with your theme or what you're working on. So again, skills addressed there, sensory integration, finger isolation, which is great. So if a kid has some difficulty using just like one finger at a time, you can work on that skill. And then that visual, motor, and perceptual skills as well.
Okay, now we're ready. Okay. So some different hand strengthening tools. So we mentioned putty is one of them, or theraputty. So there's different levels and strengths of this. So there's like a extra soft, soft, medium, and hard. The red one is like the soft one that I would probably use for some of our little guys, and then kind of increase to that green one. The blue one is really, really hard, so I probably wouldn't recommend that. But you can hide things. We hide beads or other small items in putty. But it's a little bit, it's more resistive than just a Play-Doh. So it does really require you to activate those little muscles in your hand. So it's a really great hand strengthening tool. Play-Doh, again, also really great if you don't have putty. Any of the things that we're doing in putty, you could do with Play-Doh. So again, you can roll out little balls, you can hide items in it and have to find them with your hands. Lots of things there. Playing with rubber bands and putting them on like a little board or something like that. So pull stuff. So you have to pull them apart and put them back together, twist and turn. So that's like a nice resistive activity that's going to allow you some more hand strengthening opportunities. Clothespins, which are really great because they require more of that, the use of your like tripod fingers, but also a really good strengthening activity. So I'll do some clothespin activities. Water droppers, we've already talked about. The spray bottle, again, another great hand strengthening activity. Using a hole punch for some of our older kids. And some hole punches are really pretty challenging to squeeze. A lot of my kids, I feel like with our hole punches have to use two hands, but there are also some smaller ones that I've seen where you can do them with one hand, with like a child size hand. So that's also another great option to work on that hand strengthening. Squeezing glue bottles, doing pop beads where you push them together and have to pull them apart. Legos, or doing anything with Velcro. So having to pull something, Velcro pieces apart, or doing something like that where you're really having to activate the muscles of your hands. The picture on the right is a picture of squigs that we use. So those you can kind of push into a mirror or other kind of object and then have to pull them up, pull them off. So that's a good hand strengthening activity. Tearing paper, and there's lots of different crafts where you can do tearing paper. Another great bilateral coordination activity because like one hand has to pull towards you and the other hand has to pull away, and that can be really tricky for some kids to motor plan. And again, I mentioned this before, different tongs and tweezers. So, and this picture on the left, there we're using tweezers to pick up the little pieces of this game. And this game does come with tweezers, but I like ours better. So we replace them. But there's a bunch of games, and any game with a small piece, I would say you can add tweezers or tongs in to help kind of support that. Okay. Um, did I jump ahead? I think no, I didn't jump ahead. Sorry. So a spray bottle art activity. So this is for to target more of that hand strengthening and grasping. So you need a spray bottle with water, food coloring, a tray, a black cutout, some tape and white construction paper. So you're going to create that cutout, whatever shape you want it to be, your letter, whatever it is, and put it onto the white background. You're going to mix water and preferred food coloring into the spray bottle and then spray it and then remove that overlay to reveal your design. So really great hand strengthening and grasping activity. Okay, so animal rescue. This is a fun one for more of that hand strengthening with rubber bands. So you're going to just put the rubber bands over the toys. And it's really fun because I think it's an easy way to upgrade or downgrade based on how stretchy those rubber bands are. So have the child save the trapped animals by removing the rubber bands. So it's a nice way to get kids to, they can play the little rescuer and help save the animal. So really good bilateral coordination as well as strengthening activity. Okay, so our Mr. Tennis Ball here. I love using this guy. I will say, if you're doing it with a brand new tennis ball, it's really, really tricky to squeeze it open at first. But it's a really fun little activity. So you can make a minion out of him. You can do kind of whatever you want, but you just need a tennis ball. You're going to cut a slit in the tennis ball. I think I used a bread knife with this. Actually, I was surprised that that kind of worked a little bit better. I was a little bit scared of the box cutter, but that's how I did it. And then you can glue your googly eyes on or draw your picture. And then you're going to have the child squeeze open the mouth and you can place pom poms inside to feed him. Again, the tennis ball can be pretty firm initially, so they might need those two hands, but then once it gets used, it'll get a little bit softer. But just a fun way to do it. My kids love that I do this with love feeding the minion or whatever it is you want to make it into. So again, working on hand strengthening, that bilateral coordination, and you can incorporate some pincer grasp with picking up pom poms to and that's a great focus of this.
I've also, with that last one, also done just to make it even more challenging, my kids that really need to work on some strengthening. They're squeezing with one hand, and then we're picking up the pom pom with tweezers on the
Okay.
other side. So you can really kind of make it more challenging for the kids that need that little extra challenge, or you really want to work on, strengthening both sides. And then usually when we do the squeezing the ball with one hand, we'll also switch into the other hand, so we're getting
Both
both
hands.
hands. Mm-hmm.
Pop the blocks. So you have one of these little pop it tools. What you do is you have to squeeze them in the belly and then the ball pops out. So you can make a tower of blocks and load the ball into the toy and have the kids try and knock it down. I will say my littles usually love these little pop it toys. I've seen them at the dollar store before, so they're very cheap and easy to get, hopefully. But good for hand strength and bilateral coordination, especially that symmetrical, like using two hands together at the same time. All right, so we're going to do a little case study. So the child in this picture is 4 years old. What do you think about their grasp and what interventions do you think would help?
So go ahead and open up your chat box and throw in some different interventions that you would do to help facilitate a more appropriate grasping pattern. Give 1 minute here to answer that.
All right. Sorry, I'm going to scroll up. Okay, everybody's smaller marker sharpness. Yeah, so if this child is not using an age appropriate grasp as of yet, um, yep, pencil grips. Yeah. So I think also like the where she's holding the marker, she's holding it right at like the top of the marker versus closer to the bottom. She is using her other hand to stabilize, which is great. Um, but it looks like her forearm is a little bit floating and off the table as well. So I think that I would probably start with, I think people said like the slant board for sure. I also think it's hard to tell, but it looks like she's kind of using some of that ulnar side of her hand a little bit for some of that motion. But yeah, I definitely would consider maybe doing a shortened marker or a shortened, probably, well, I guess it would have to be a marker on the paper towel, but yeah, like a shortened marker for working on that grip. Probably doing some more like hand strengthening stuff, making sure that it's getting some kind of vertical surface or the slant board so that way she's supported underneath. Yeah, I do think the tray is making it a little bit tricky with the lip on the tray. So I definitely think that that's a good point too. I would also probably work on probably some strengthening stuff with her, opening up that web space a little bit so her thumb is a little bit more active on there. But yeah, those are all great ideas. Like the droppers and the tweezers, love all of that stuff. Those are all things that we were doing in our sessions together. Great.
Okay, we're going to go through some different seasonal and holiday activities. So things that you can do just as the holidays roll through, some different ideas that we had for you guys. So the first is like leaf names. So again, we talked about like going out in nature, picking some things. So with this, you can use leaves and flowers, construction paper, scissors and glue, and then have kids pick out and cut small pieces of leaves or different things, twigs. It could be anything that you kind of have around. Um, and glue onto the construction paper in the shape of a name. Again, this could be the shape of the week. It could be letters. It could be lines. It could be whatever you want it to be. This is really great to kind of address that sensory integration, scissor skills, bilateral coordination, and pressure modulation. Hand strengthening as well for that like glue, different things like that. So you can really kind of make it what you want to, which is really great. This is when we do around like Halloween time, our clothespin spider, but you could make any animal really that you wanted
Totally.
with that. But we'll use clothespins, construction paper, some googly eyes, and glue. We'll cut out a circle using the black construction paper, put on some googly eyes, and then have the students place on the clothespins. You can have them help you paint the clothespins if you want, or have it done. You can also do this activity with like this spider has 3 legs, this spider has 8 legs, this spider has 2 legs, and really practice counting. Also, it's another really fun one to do. Um, so again, with this, we're addressing hand strengthening, that bilateral coordination. So holding that spider with one hand, clipping it on with the other, pincer grasp, and then visual perceptual to make sure we're actually getting it where it needs to go when putting it onto the spider. So that's a really fun one. A Thanksgiving turkey, and we will modify this and also do it. I've done like a lion with dandelions during certain types of times of the year. You could make a wreath, you could make all kinds of fun things. This was just when we did it like Thanksgiving time. So for this, you just need some cardboard, a marker, leaves, and then maybe something to, something to poke the holes there. So you trace them, you kind of punch the holes for the feathers, and then you can collect, leaves or whatever and put them into the holes. So this is really great for that pincer grasp, so picking things up, placing it into that really fine motor skill, the visual motor and perceptual, and then using 2 hands together at the same time as well. So that's a really great one. So winter sweater stickers. Again, making it during different times of the year is totally fine, but this is something you could do in the winter time. So with this, we use stickers, construction paper and markers, and just kind of drawing the outline of a sweater, and have students place on stickers onto the sweater. So this might be good for our youngers that are still working on that. Like pincer grasp stickers can be really motivating too, which is a really fun one. Again, we added pom poms and glue. We wanted to adapt this a little bit further, so we did that with some glue. So again, making it what it works for your students as well. So just thinking about like how you could upgrade or downgrade this activity. So upgrade, you could have the kids cut out the shapes. Downgrade, you could slightly kind of peel the stickers for them, or use like a glue stick instead of a bottle, if you wanted to use pom poms. So you can really kind of, again, make these things and meet the students where they're at. So again, skills addressed here, that pincer grasp and that bilateral coordination are both things addressed here.
All right. So again, very timely for this week specifically. I love you to pieces. So you make your little heart and then get lots of paper to tear out, and glue that on there. So you can have kids cut out the heart. You can have them tear it. So for some of my kids that don't really have that are still working on that hand strength and that motor plan of towards tearing the paper, I might do little rips at the top of the paper. I've also used tissue paper as well versus like a construction paper. The tissue paper will be a little bit easier because it's a little bit lighter versus the construction paper. You need a little bit more strength and force in order to tear. Um, so just a great little activity, but focuses on so many things in such an easy way to like upgrade and downgrade based on what you are working on with your students or what they might need to work on. We have a little beaded shamrock. So you just need some green beads and a green pipe cleaner. You're going to twist all the pipe cleaner ends together around the base and then bead the 3 pipe cleaners and then fold them down and twist them onto the base. So you're going to repeat that for each of those pipe cleaners. Super great to work on to use like the pony beads for this. Again, you could do slightly bigger beads if you needed to downgrade it a little bit or really small ones. There are like tiny, tiny beads too that you could do for a similar activity. So great for that bilateral coordination, pincer grasp, and visual motor and perceptual skills. So rainbow Q-tip painting. So you just need some Q-tips, some paints and construction paper, probably a smock, something like that. So you can print or draw a rainbow outline and have the student use the Q-tip to paint the colors. Remember, you can always cut the Q-tip for smaller to work on that grasp. I kind of love this example because it's obvious that the student like understood it to begin with, right? They've got some nice blue dots and then green dots, and then they kind of go a little
Rogue.
a little rogue, which is fantastic, right? Like that's what kids do. So it's just a fun way to, challenge you work on these grasping skills, work on that hand strength, but then like this is realistically what it looks like. So I just love having this little example because like it they got the concept, but then they wanted to do their own thing, which I think is great. So spring flowers, you just need a colander and like some pretend or real flowers, or you could use pipe cleaners and have children thread the flowers through the colander. Just a super simple activity that like kids could do at home. You probably have a colander you could bring in to have your kids practice, and just work on that tripod or pincer grasp and those visual motor skills. A toilet paper firework. So these are fun to get little toilet paper rolls. You just cut the little strips in them, and the cardboard is a lot harder to cut. So that really does require some good hand strength, but it could be a good challenge for some of your kids. And then you can twist and roll the toilet paper in the paint and then stamp it onto construction paper. Lots of fun ways to adapt it too with all of these activities. All right. So we are going to just kind of go through quickly here some of our guiding principles and things that we would love for you to take home with you today. So hand development. So children's hands are still developing, right? A 3-year-old's hands are very different, like joints, muscle strength, we like all of those things. Their joints and muscles are still developing. So a 3-year-old is not ready to do the things that a 6-year-old is ready to do. Their bones are still fusing together. Like there's so many things that are still happening, which is why we think those like strengthening activities, play, doing all of those things where they're active and moving their bodies is so much more important. Between ages 2 and 4, the interest in like coloring, drawing, all of those things is very wide, and that is okay. I have some 3-year-olds that like want to sit and trace. And then I have others that it takes them to like closer to 4 or 5 for them to be able to be more interested in it. And that is normal to have such a wide age range. Coloring, the same thing. I feel like I have some kids that really love coloring, even starting at like 2, 2.5, but then others, it takes them a lot longer to be interested. So just keeping in mind that like these are all skills that are developing, and that's okay. Ages 5+ is when we start paying closer attention to alignment, spacing, orientation, and legibility. I'm just not super concerned about that, those things, even until like older than 5. How do we teach these skills? So we typically teach by tracing and then copying and then like spontaneously being able to do it. So that's like including like pre-writing strokes, so vertical lines, horizontal lines, shapes, and numbers, or it's letters and numbers is generally how we teach these things. Generally, we teach uppercase and then lowercase and teach top to bottom. So we start our letters at the top. Um, just kind of wanted to leave these things here because I feel like, everybody has high expectations for kids, and yet there's not always a lot of like teaching of handwriting these days. And so we just like to leave this here so you have some of what like our guiding principles are and what our recommendations are for moving forward. So just a couple of resources here. We have our Handwriting Without Tears. And Matman is a really good place to start. That's part of Handwriting Without Tears for more of those like pre-writing skills. All right. So we have, here's our list of resources. We've talked about Handwriting Without Tears a lot. Matman, Mama OT, OT Mom, Learning Tools to Grow. Tools to Grow does have a subscription, but there are also free resources as well. But these are just people that have some fun activities out there. And then we wanted to kind of leave you some of the apps that we use often. We do recommend using a stylus. Again, we think it's better that you're doing nature, crafts, all of those stuff. But we're also realistic, and we also use, iPad apps when necessary. So Letter School, Dexteria Junior is a really fun one to work on more of that dexterity and fingers. Writing Wizard, Handwriting Without Tears, and there's also like a Wet Dry Try app. So any of the writing ones, we recommend you use a stylus for so that they can still practice that grasping and holding on to something.
I will say that I know we talked about this a few times in the presentation. This is not my go-to.
No.
This is kind of something I'll use if I have a student that is, I've had a student that is 6 and has just been so uninterested in handwriting in any format, any shape, whether it's sensory, whether it's on paper, whether it's on the board, we've tried so many different things and he's really so disinterested. And so this was one of the things we tried, and that was the thing for him. And we've also recommended, and he does, I'm like, if they're working on an iPad at home, if I have a kid that's sitting in front of a screen at home, I'm like, maybe we can make it more functional and practice writing at the same time. So I'll ask parents like, hey, do you have an iPad at home? Are they kind of sitting doing iPad time? Can we throw
Yeah.
on the ABCs instead? And I have a parent that said, we've been doing this now instead of videos and he loves it and we're practicing handwriting. I'm like, great, if we can replace some of that screen time
Yeah.
with at least something that's also working on fine motor, that's a win in my book. So again, not our go-to, but we know
These are the ones we
sometimes
do
we
recommend.
know sometimes that it is a tool that can be used. So we
Hmm.
wanted to give you what is the best for what we've seen. Okay. So we hope everyone got some great play-based ideas to promote the skills required for handwriting. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We will be on for a moment or two if there's more questions or anything. Go ahead and like ask in the chat box too. But we hope everyone really enjoyed this presentation and got some great ideas.